Hi there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. August is Top 10 month, and today we're going to take a look at the top 10 golems of all time. In Magic, golems are exclusively artifact creatures and come from a very specific folklore tradition. The first one to see print was ABU's Obsidianus Golem, a 4/6 for 6 that any deck could play, regardless of color, that also came with a humorous Artificer's Song. Today, we're going to explain exactly where the idea came from and run down the top 10 best and coolest golems in the game's history. Origins. The golem is derived from Eastern European Jewish folklore. For Jews in Europe, persecution by government and their neighbors was part of daily life for close to 2 millennia, and the Jewish communities often wished and daydreamed for deliverance. There are numerous stories in communities such as Prague and Chelm that tell of a sagacious rabbi who found the secret of shaping clay and animating it through his studies. The word golem means unshaped lump in Hebrew. The rabbi took that clump, whether of clay or stone or whatever, and formed a rough humanoid form, and on its forehead he wrote the Hebrew letters Emeth, truth. When the community was ravaged by outsiders, the golem was commanded to defend the people. However, the law of the Sabbath must be obeyed, and so before the day of rest would come, the rabbi would reach up to the golem's head and erase the aleph, the first character of the word, so that it now read meth, dead, and the golem's animating force disappeared. That way, the commandment not to work on the Sabbath would be kept. Some versions of the golem story have different words, or have the rabbi forget or fail to erase the letter, so that when the Sabbath came, the golem would turn on its community in a deadly spree. The golem is definitely one of the more seminal folklore tales, inspiring Czech writers to create their own tales of automata called robots. English author Mary Shelley used a more ghoulish version to create Frankenstein's monster. Siegel and Schuster, Jewish American immigrants in the 1920s, used the golem as a community defender, as a template to create Superman, the Man of Steel, who fought off Nazis and mob thugs in his early days. Hollywood has avoided adapting the tale of the golem from the original source for the most part, however, because golems aren't supposed to be scary, and viewers want to see scary things. Golems are supposed to be defenders. The closest story I can think of is The Iron Giant, a film that I highly recommend. And like many of Magic's creatures, golems were also a staple in Dungeons & Dragons, with 4 different varieties described in the first monster manual. Anyway, now you know a whole lot about the origins of the golem, so now let's get down to business and take a look at the top 10 golems of Magic. There are 95 printed at the moment, and we've winnowed them down to the very best. Grounds rule for this list? The card has to be a creature, and it has to be a golem. That's it. Number 10. Mycosynth Golem. If you've seen my Mirrodin reviews, you know that I am not in favor of affinity for artifacts. Affinity was one of the worst mechanics for the game's health in the whole of Magic's history. Mycosynth Golem pushes the envelope despite its modest stats for such a high mana cost, but when he hits the table, all your other artifacts are likely to hit the table as well. Fortunately, no one ever broke this card. Artificer Johnnies of the world, this is a puzzle you ought to try. Number 9. Brass Herald. Apocalypse is well known for its emphasis on enemy gold cards, but it also featured this versatile lord. Combining the power of the set's Ringleader cycle, looking at the top 4 cards of your library and acting as a lord for the creature type of your choice, this is an expensive but quite powerful lord that can go into any tribal deck, maybe even a golem deck. Number 8. Mage Ring Responder. While the large body and steep untap costs are reminiscent of previous giants like Colossus of Sardia, Mage Ring Responder's 7 mana figure and 7/7 stats are much more achievable. Also, it can take out huge fatties when it attacks, giving impressive value for all that mana you're using. Yes, using Responder is going to put a lot of eggs in one basket, but this happens to be a really nice basket. Number 7. Darksteel's Darksteel Colossus, the mightiest creature on Mirrodin. Indestructible and Trample meant that this guy would always give as good as he got. I played this guy quite a bit in Standard with Tooth and Nail, and thanks to the power of the Urzatron, I sometimes got to hardcast him on turn 4. And Indestructibility made more than one player throw up their hands in aggravation because there was nothing they could do to deal with the Colossus. Number 6. Precursor Golem. This 3/3 hits the table with 2 identical siblings, each with a sympathetic bond. Target one golem, and every golem will feel the same effect. This can be beneficial, or it can bite you in the rear end. Given Magic's usual preference for removal over pump in metagames, it's a risk. Still, 9 power on the table for 5 mana is an amazing deal. Casual decks definitely should give this guy a try. Number 5. Bosch, Iron Golem. This guy's stats are a touch underwhelming at 8 mana, but if you can untap with Bosch in play, he starts to throw heavy metal around and deal lots of direct damage. As befits his red activated ability, if there's a golem that fits the stereotype of the slow giant that ends up causing mass destruction, Bosch best fits that bill. Number 4. Lodestone Golem. Vintage and Legacy Stacks decks know the power of ramping out a creature that taxes all of your opponent's spells, and tacking 5/3 stats onto this effect is brutal. Nicholas DeJohn, Vintage player extraordinaire, this one is for you. Lodestone Golem's power can't be denied. Number 3. Solemn Simulacrum. While it hasn't seen much play in Extended or Modern, this was a staple in Standard as soon as the affinity bans were laid down, and EDH players of all stripes appreciate the card advantage that Jens Thorin's Invitational card provides. Its original nickname may be Sab Robot, but you're gonna smile every time you command it. While Simulacrum is never gonna be the best card in your deck, you're almost always glad to put it into play. Number 2. Karn, Silver Golem. Karn was a fan favorite as soon as he saw print in Urza Saga, since he could hold off major threats while letting you animate your other artifacts into a brutal, unusual army. A variant of ABU's Animate Artifact and Antiquity's Titania's Song itself, Karn finally gave every color a stab at making the machines march to a player's whim. Sadly, Karn Liberated has transcended his golem nature and is a planeswalker and thus can't fit onto the list. So before we get to our number 1 golem, let's recognize our honorable mentions that didn't make it onto the list. Obsianus Golem may have been the subject of some good-natured jokes when I started playing in 1993, but players latched onto this big guy at the time as a versatile heavy hitter in the earliest days of the game when card selection was quite limited. This card is utterly unplayable by modern standards, but we've gotta hail the Trailblazer. Spire Golem. As part of a cycle in 5th Dawn of golems with affinity for a basic land type, Spire Golem was the best because it harnessed the power of the most controlling color. Mono blue mages could jam out the 2/4 flyer out on turn 3, which was considerably ahead of the curve, or mono blue mages could wait until they had 6 islands in play and just dump this into play for free. Due to the aggravation the golem was accompanied by, this didn't make the cut. New Phyrexia's Blade Splicer really should be on this list. A 1/1 body that comes into play with a 3/3 golem buddy and giving the tribe first strike, 4 power for 3 mana, that's a hell of a deal. Sadly, since Blade Splicer is itself a human that just happens to come with a golem, it doesn't get a spot on the list, sorry. Lastly, Sundering Titan's power can be overwhelming, but the misery of mass land disruption associated with this card means that this 7/10's part of the Fun Police, and I don't want to honor it with a slot. If you really believe that this should be on the list, by all means, you're welcome to do so. I'm pretty sure that when I was playing this in Standard, it may have griefed some players out of the game, and that's not a healthy thing. This is really a dishonorable mention. And our number 1 golem is Blightsteel Colossus. One of Magic's biggest creatures, this massive guy gets a massive upgrade from the previous version in Darksteel with the inclusion of Infect, one of the scariest keywords in Magic. Couple that with Trample, and you have a juggernaut of destruction that will mow down countless armies in pursuit of its prey. There's very little most mages can do to stop this golem's march. Anyone who has seen it in action can attest to its status as an artifact to be feared. Thanks for watching. August has been the month of the top 10 list, a nice change of pace for my channel, but we'll be getting back to the regular format soon enough. This list was especially heavy on the lore, something I usually don't get into all that much, so if you appreciated that, let me know. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please be sure to leave a comment, and also like, subscribe, share it with your friends, you know, the regular YouTube stuff. And if there's a golem I forgot about, please be sure to let me know in the comments. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games, and good luck.